some of the first video clips in here, my wireless mic was experiencing dropouts. I'm going to replace it, but nothing really crucial got lost, but I apologize for that. Thanks. Okay, hello everybody. This is episode 2 of the PAF Universe show. Universe. So this week sucked. I had to get a skin cancer operation, and my cheek looks like a sewing machine ran over my face. But it was good. We needed to get it done, you know. If you're a young person, you need to stay out of the sun or make sure you use sunscreen, because this isn't any fun and it'll get you. So I lived in Miami for 13 years, and a young guy riding his bicycle all over the place in the sun. My face was always sunburned, and so it's payoff time. Karma. Anyway, this show is mainly about pickup power and ohms. Ohms is something that guitar players don't understand, and so I did my best to explain it all in my garbled mouth method. I'm definitely not a public speaker. So I mangled my way through it, and I hope you get something out of it, and get this idea out of your head that ohms is power, because it's not power. And then so mainly that's what it's about, and I rambled on for about 45 minutes, and there's a few other things I threw in there that you might enjoy. So this is episode 2. Hope you get something out of it. Hope you enjoy it. And we'll see you next weekend for episode 3. And let's keep this going, and I hope you guys will subscribe so that you get updated on when next episode goes up, because it may not be, it might be a little more than a week before the next episode shows up, because of trying to keep up with building the orders and life in general. So, like, Tuesday I have to go get my stitches pulled out. So that's a big get up early and go driving deal, Lots of fun for an old guy. Okay, that's it. Okay, I'm gonna show you how I measure pickups, different measuring tools that I use. And a lot of this stuff is really misunderstood by guitar players and simplified, so this isn't going to be new for some people, but for some people, most people it is. This is a multimeter. Duh. Okay, so that's what you're saying. The only thing I use on it is the ohms measurements. Ohms, the most misunderstood concept that guitar players don't really understand at all. So here's a Strat pickup. Whoopee. Okay, we're going to measure it. This is kind of hard to do with the camera on a pole. So it measures 5.821 K, which means thousands of ohms. Just thousands and thousands of ohms. So what does that mean? It means that the wire coil on it has 5.821 thousand ohms, thousands of ohms. And is that hot? Is that weak? What is it? You don't know. And the meter isn't going to tell you. It just tells you what the resistance is. So here's some old Gibson humbuckers. And this one measures 15.45 K. So like, wow, that's a really hot pickup. 15 ohms, 15 K ohms. Almost 15.5 K ohms. It's got to be really hot, it's got to be really loud, it's got to be really rock and roll. No. We'll talk about that in a little bit here. Here's its brother, sister, mother. Let's see, what does it measure? It measures 8.71 K. So which one's hotter? The 15K one is actually a bridge pickup. The 8.7K is the neck pickup. So why this huge difference? Well, we're going to get into that. So, get rid of that. Here's the next meter that I use. Now, these are just meters. They're not the Bible. They don't tell you about tone. Not at all. They are guidance tools, is basically what they are. This is an LCR meter. Not making a beep. It's being mean. Let's see if we hook it up to something, it will beep. Like this is of no importance. That's really odd. It's supposed to make a beep. There. Okay, so I just turned it on to a capacitance reading. And this capacitor reads 0.020 microfarad. And this up here is AC resistance. It's not ohms. It's not the same thing as this meter. So we'll get into that too. So this can also read AC resistance. Though it's fighting me. I think maybe it needs a new battery. And this is inductance. So there's the AC resistance. It's 12.32, or actually 123.2. Anyway, we'll get more into this. Whoops! Let's not jiggle the pole. And that's capacitance, so we're back to that. So we're going to go into this meter and what it's good for. Some people geek out on it. We'll go into it later. So that's that. This is my handgun. This is a 45. It's a 12-inch. No, it isn't. This is a micrometer. This is the most important tool that I use. And what does it do? It measures really tiny, and it's there we go. Got to turn the polarizer equalizer here. It measures really, really tiny things, and I use it to measure the width of magnet wire. Okay, so this camera mount's a little jiggly. Anyway, so what is this micrometer good for? Well, you need to know the exact diameter of the wire you're working with. If you don't, you're just shooting in the dark. This is a vintage heavy form bar spool of wire, and you notice it says 43 gauge on it. So we need to know what it actually measures. So we get it in there. And it's not in there. Like I said, this is hard to do with all this cheap stuff. So got it in there, getting a measurement. It says 0.00265. Well, guess what? That's not 43 gauge wire. That's 42 gauge wire. And that causes earthquakes. No. So 0.00265, that is a 42 gauge wire. And in fact, that's the most common measurement of vintage PAF wire. So this is good. This is a roll of wire I can use to make a PAF replica, except for the fact that vintage form bar wire was never used in PAFs. So it's good, but I'm not going to waste it on that. So it's worth a try, but you know, this the form bar wire is the insulation is a much darker sound than plain enamel wire, which is a much brighter sound. So this little micrometer here just told me it'd be a big mistake to use this any place that would use 43 gauge wire. So here's another spool of form bar, heavy form bar, and you notice it says 42 gauge 0.0025, and that's a little bit on the slim side, but so let's measure it and see what it actually measures. Damn it. So it's on the fatter side of the tolerances for 42 gauge. 42 gauge wire has a wide tolerance for outside diameter readings. So this is why you need a micrometer. You have to measure every roll, every coil you wind. If you don't, you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and you're going to wonder what the heck is going on, because you didn't do your homework, you didn't learn your stuff. So 0.0295, that's pretty thick. That's pretty thick up there. So it would have to be used in a different situation. So back to the LCR meter: inductance, capacitance, resistance. It uses a test signal of a kilohertz and a really low test frequency, kilohertz. This is frequencies here, so it's 120 hertz and 1 kilohertz. So guitar pickups are mostly like around 4K, 6K. So 1 kilohertz is 1,000 hertz, and that's kind of really out of the range of most pickups. So that's a problem with these meters. Some of them will go up to 10 kilohertz, but then they don't really read real well up there. So it's you get kind of nonsense readings. It's not really the cool thing to do, you know. So I've got it in inductance right now on this this one pickup here. And what is inductance? When you wind a coil, you get a frequency out of it, you get resistance from the coil. But when it's in action, the alternating current running through it also generates reverse currents that oppose what's running through the coil. So if you wind a really hot pickup, it really chokes itself off. You lose a lot of treble, the bass gets really flubby. And so that's what henries are, and what a henry is a measure of inductance. I don't know who the heck Henry is either, so I'm not an engineer here. I'm more like a electronics mechanic. I just sort of get intuitions through these meters, if you could say it that way. So I'm no genius, but I know what these meters do, and they are helpful. They're more like learning tools than, you know, day-to-day usefulness and stuff like that. So this pickup is 8.569 henries, and that's really dark. I think this is probably the 15K one. And why is it 15K? It's because it's wound with 43 gauge wire. It's not wound with 42 gauge wire. Why do they do that? Because it's a cheap way to darken up a bridge pickup, but then you lose transparency and they just don't sound good. They don't sound right to me, and it's a cheesy trick. And Gibson does it, Duncan does it. I don't like it. It sucks. So up here we have AC resistance, which is 19.70 AC ohms. It's not the same thing as DC ohms, which is what the other meter is. But you can kind of correlate this reading to DC ohms, so they're similar. So a 19K pickup is going to be pretty darn dark sounding. So you get a hint of that from this measurement here. So let's switch over and take a reading off this other pickup. And of course you have to use the ground lead to match up with, and the hot lead to hot. So now look at this. This is 42 gauge wire. It's much more open sounding, more clear, bright. And so that's what's in the neck. so it's better for the neck. It's giving you a lot brighter sound. 4.980 Henrys and 12.21 AC ohms. So that's what this meter is useful for. If you make some kind of little change or something and you want to see how much it changed in the 1 kilohertz reading, you get your inductance readings and your ACR readings is what I call them. And Seth Lever once said that they wound their paths to 4 Henrys, and actually their low wind 10,000 winds PAFs measured almost exactly 4 Henrys. So that little tidbit. So we also use this for measuring capacitors, so let's take a look at that. Okay, now we're going to do capacitors. If I stop bumping this damn camera holder on a pole, $16. So this is a new old stock Sprague D paper and oil. It's got the filler cap on this end. Of course, I've got insulation over it so you can't see it. So these are also directional. They always put the filler cap towards on the tone pot. Why they did that, probably, I don't know. I've not actually listed to that, but the modern ones don't have filler caps on them, so you can't orient them a certain way anyway. And besides, the difference in sound is probably really minimal. So let's measure this guy. It's supposed to be 0.022. It'd be nice if I kept it in frame. So we switch to capacitance. So it's 0.023, 0.8 microfarad. So this particular LCR meter is really accurate. So you don't want to buy a cheap multimeter because they were really not accurate at all. Okay, so but notice up here we've also got that AC resistance reading, 124.0, right? 124.0 on the nose. So that tells me it's a little dark. 124. Let's see, make sure I'm reading that right. Yeah. So let's measure a mojo tone, vitamin Q, which I really like these. These are 600 volt. The higher the voltage, the warmer you get. So this one's almost the same reading, but it's look at the AC resistance. It's 39.56. So this is a lot brighter than this old, new old stock B. So the AC resistance is really a good thing to read on capacitors when you're comparing them to each other. So let's go back and compare these two. This is a lux. Okay, so that's 124 AC resistance, 125. And the lux. This one's 219. It's like darker than all of them. And it's right on the nose, 0.022. So he's filling them with some strange oil, because that's just really dark. I've not actually listened to this thing yet, but that's kind of strange. So, okay, this is a 0.015 Russian, but it's 0.014. Dang it. Now look at the AC resistance on this one. It's basically 90. So it's really low. So these are really good for neck position for woman tone stuff. So this meter is pretty dang useful. I use it mostly for measuring capacitors. I used to be really geeked out, and I measure every pickup, how many henries it was, and blah blah blah. Write it all down on charts and everything. But you know, you go through a stage like that when you're learning your stuff. Let's take a read of this just for yucks. This is I used to really like these until their quality control just went to hell. Oh, it's a Jensen copper foil. It's 0.020 and 39.6. Okay, well, 40 AC resistance. And these are really nice when they were actually close to what their value was supposed to be. So I quit buying them because they went really wacko. So there you go. That's what I use for capacitors, and used to use for measuring pickups when I was learning this stuff. This also, the X-Tech, this is the only model LCR meter that really works at all for pickups, accuracy for pickups. One wind around a coil around your magnet will give you 1 unit of voltage. It won't give you 1 volt. It'll give you a unit of voltage, and that depends on how strong your magnet is. The diameter of your wire, what your wire is made out of, copper or silver or gold or whatever. 2 winds will double your voltage. But pickup makers don't rate their guitar pickups in voltages, which makes sense because you'd have to have the exact input, and there's no standard for that. So they use ohms, which is, it's kind of dumb. But people understand it, but they don't understand it. So you could take 40 gauge wire, 10,000 winds, you get 7K, 10,000 winds of 45 gauge wire, you might get 20K. So there's no rating, no power rating in ohms. It's useless for that. So keep that in mind, you know, when you're reading specs on famous Les Pauls and what the pickups measured. Well, that doesn't tell you anything about the tone, especially, and about the power. Although vaguely, you know, 10,000 winds is what the official recipe was, so most PAFs measured just over 7K because they were 10,000 winds. That was the recipe. But then they didn't control how many winds they were putting on, so a lot of them got overwound, so you could get a PAF with 9K. So it does tell you that you're going to get more voltage output because, you know, more winds equals more resistance. But you don't know what the diameter of the wire in that PAF is. And if you don't know that, you don't know what those ohms even means. The diameter of the wires in PAFs varied a lot. And then on top of that, the magnets were all very weak up until about 1960, when they started flipping over to Alnico 5. Most PAF magnets were really weak. Like I said, except for the later ones. So this, I forgot to talk about this. This is my other measurement tool I use a lot. And it's a DC Gauss meter. So turn it on. Here's a replica sandcast magnet. I was actually the first one to have sandcast magnets made again back in 2003 or something like that. I had two different companies working out of China trying to replicate them, and both of them succeeded. But the second batch was a failure from the other company. So this is a DC Gauss meter. I'm taking a reading off the edge. That's 653 Gauss. That's south side. And that's north side, negative. So this is another tool I use. Almost every day. So you got these really weak magnets and PAFs, which makes the voltage very low. They usually range around like 400 Gauss or so. And the modern magnets can charge up to 600 to 700 for Alnico 5. These are all Alnico 5. So I think that covers everything. I hope I haven't confused everybody. If you have questions about it, let it fly, and I'll try to explain it better. I'm not a real vocal person. I do better writing than I do speaking. So let's move on to something else here, and hope this was educational and helped you. So the reason that DC resistance doesn't mean anything about how powerful your pickup is because it has to do with wire diameter. So say this is this represents a piece of 38 gauge wire. It's a fat piece of copper. The fatter the wire is, the easier electrons can move through it quickly. And of course it's an alternating current. It's a frequency. So, but this thick wire is going to measure really low resistance, especially if you can say resistance. I had a long week. So let's say this wire here, this is a 42 gauge versus 38 gauge. So this is a lot thinner. Electrons can't move through it as fast. It's almost like hoses. So this wire has a lot more resistance reading. So you wind a coil, and this one would be like 4K, like a Charlie Christian is 38 gauge, and they measure like 3K coils, but they're not weak, they're not powerless, they're not weak pickups, because they had a decent cobalt magnet on it. Although those were kind of weak for their time period because they didn't have alnico. But anyway, I'm confusing the issue here. So unless you know the diameter of the wire, you can't relate it because you don't know the resistance of the wire. And that's super important. And that's why you use a micrometer to measure every spool of magnet wire you use to get the diameter, to get a sense of how clear it's going to sound or how compressed it's going to sound. Fat wire is very open sounding, not compressed, very, very clear, very bright. Thin wire is going to be a lot more compressed, darker, a lot less open. So we got this pickup here. It's a 7.5K. Is it going to be bright? Is it going to be more compressed and warmer? You don't know because you don't know the diameter of the wire. And even if it's 42 gauge wire, it could be really fat wire, or it could be really thin wire. So a fat 42 gauge wire could have, like, 6,500 winds on it, and it's going to measure low because fat wire is low resistance. So I'm trying to get across that ohms doesn't really mean anything. It's, like I said, it's only used as a check for a known spool of wire, known diameter. So, I hope this is getting across. Now, let's talk about hot pickups. Well, actually, when you hear a pickup and it sounds really hot, usually it's a weak pickup, because weak pickups are brighter, and the human brain perceives trebly noises as being louder. And in guitar pickups, a trebly pickup has a larger frequency response. It has more treble, has a broader range, and it'll be louder. So ohms doesn't mean anything to guitar players. It shouldn't mean anything. So I hope that gets across. I remember one guy had a vintage gold top Gibson playing at the jam, and he was going, "Man, these pickups are really hot." And they were P90s, and I measured them, and actually they were really low reading, really loud treble. So hot pickups aren't what you think they are. If you have an actual pickup that's high voltage, high, a lot of whines, it's going to be dark and the treble's going to be clipped. So, there's that. So here's another interesting thing. If you want to actually see the voltage output from a guitar pickup, here's a way to do it. And this is a random old pickup I did years ago. Take a piece of magnetic steel and then force it down in a quick movement over the pole screws. Now watch the needle. See it jumping to the left? That's not much of a jump there, so this isn't a very strong pickup. And then do it over the slug side. This is also how you tell polarity of a pickup, by which direction the needle goes. So you also need to hook up your alligator clips there to the hot and ground side, and actually I have this backwards. You should have the hot lead going to the center, and then this to the ground, and then it will go the right way. So you take another pickup, hook it up, and if the needle goes the same way, both pickups will be in phase. So just for curiosity, let's measure this pickup and see what the DCR reading is. Okay, so let's read the DC ohms. Exciting. How hot is this pickup? It's not hot at all. 7.6K. So let's see what it actually is. This is an old prototype. This is a 58 VL prototype. And it's a bridge. And it has fat wire in it, so that's why the reading is low, 7.6K. The wire is probably 0.00275, 0.0028 range. And that wire is low resistance wire, so that's why the reading is rather low. So here's another little fun thing. These are all old prototypes. These are pickups I made, some going back almost 20 years ago. And I dug them all out because I wanted to see that I might actually... Oh, those are... These are my old Pig 90s. These are great pickups. Single coils. Or I got a lot of them. I think I've got two JP bridges, which were real popular at the time, and I'm starting to slowly put these in my guitar and take a listen to them before I decide to get rid of any of them. And I just put my VL2 into my Les Paul, and it used some wire that one of my customers was calling soul wire, because anything I wound with it sounded just great. And in fact, it sounds so good, I'm going to keep it. So I may put together some sets from these and sell them off on a Reverb, or maybe do a giveaway set too, I don't know. So a lot of history in this stuff. Anyway, exciting, huh? Okay, one last thing about hot pickups. Now there are high voltage output pickups, like the heavy metal guys really like them. And usually they use ceramic magnets. Now ceramic magnets aren't a bad thing. Here's a whole stack of ceramic magnets that I had made years and years ago, and they weren't in humbuckers, they were in a laminated telly neck pickup that was really cool, and I occasionally still make them. And the thing about ceramics is they don't have any metal in them, so they don't get, the treble doesn't get clipped off because there's no metal in them. And as you can see, they read really high. And so they have pretty powerful voltage output and a lot of treble. So the bass is really clear. They're really zingy, hot pickups, and there actually are hot pickups. But I don't do anything like that. I'm not into heavy metal, and I don't serve that market. So, but I just wanted to mention that.